The medic's tent was chaos, a storm of blood, sand, and shouted orders. The smell of antiseptic mixed with diesel fuel and smoke from the burning hills beyond the wire. Every cot was taken. Every medic was shouting for saline, plasma, clamps, anything that might keep another man from slipping away. In the middle of it all moved one woman. She didn't shout. She didn't panic. Her eyes, tired, steady, unreadable, swept from one patient to the next. Her hands worked with impossible speed, tying tourniquets, cleaning wounds, stitching flesh that everyone else thought unsalvageable. Most didn't even know her full name. Her uniform just said Keen, and around camp, they called her the ghost nurse. She never joined in jokes. Never talked about home. When others took breaks to breathe or smoke, she stayed inside, cleaning instruments, folding gauze, humming under her breath, an old melody no one recognized. "She's weird," one young medic muttered. "Quiet doesn't mean weird," another replied. "Yeah? Then why's she always carrying that dog tag with no name on it?" No one ever asked her directly. No one ever dared. Outside, the base trembled under distant artillery. The PA system crackled with incoming reports. Ambushes, wounded en route, Black Hawk inbound with casualties. Again. She looked up only once when the ground shook harder than before. A medic ran in, pale and breathless. "Coming in hot! SEAL team, multiple criticals." Everyone jumped to their stations. The sound of rotors filled the air, drowning out everything. Dust blasted through the tent as the chopper touched down. Then came the stretcher. 4 Marines rushed in, carrying a body half covered in blood. The man's gear was shredded, his chest wrapped in a soaked field dressing. His face was ghost white, but his eyes were open, blue, sharp, searching. The lead medic started barking instructions, but before he could finish, the quiet nurse was already at the table. She tore the dressing open, assessed the wound, and started compressions without hesitation. "Hey, you can't just..." She ignored him. "He's got internal bleeding. I need plasma, now." The command in her voice stopped everyone. It wasn't pleading. It wasn't a request. It was an order. The younger medics hesitated, exchanging confused looks, but obeyed. Then, as the heart monitor stuttered, the wounded SEAL's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. His lips moved, cracked, barely able to form the words. "Mara?" She froze. No one at the base had ever heard her first name before. The SEAL's next words came out like a gasp of disbelief, or awe. "Valkyrie." The entire tent went silent. The other medics looked around, unsure if they'd heard right. The pilot standing at the entrance blinked. Even the commander stepped closer. The nurse didn't answer. She just looked down at him, and for the first time in months, something flickered behind her calm mask. Recognition. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You're safe now," she whispered. "I've got you." Then, like nothing had happened, she turned back to her instruments, barking out another order. "Clamp. Now. We're not losing him." The others obeyed instantly this time. Not because she outranked them, but because suddenly, they realized they weren't looking at an ordinary nurse. They were looking at someone who carried authority that came from somewhere deeper, somewhere earned in blood and fire. Outside, the wind screamed against the tent. Inside, only her voice remained steady. And though no one understood yet, everyone could feel it. Something had just changed in that room. By the time the sun rose over the desert, they would all know why the wounded SEAL had called her Valkyrie. The tense chaos dulled to silence, as if the single word had sucked the sound out of the air. Valkyrie. No one spoke it aloud again, but every medic heard it. The SEAL's breathing was shallow, his pulse flickering, yet his eyes never left her face. The base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Harris, stepped in from the doorway. "What did he just call you?" Mara didn't look up. Her voice was calm, clipped, professional. "Clamp ready. 3 units of plasma, and someone clear that corner for triage." I asked a question. "Nurse," Harris pressed. She ignored him, sliding a chest tube into place, her hands steady despite the tremor of the floor beneath them. "He needs the plasma now," she said quietly. "We can talk later. The commander hesitated. For a moment, the only sound was the rhythmic beep of the monitor and the distant rumble of artillery. Then he exhaled sharply and stepped back. Fine. Do what you have to do. For the next 20 minutes, the tent became a blur of motion. Mara led the team through a high-risk field procedure, her movements too practiced for a standard medic. She made decisions in seconds that most field surgeons debated for minutes. And every time the SEAL's heart faltered, she spoke, not softly, but with authority, her tone carrying a weight none of them could explain. Hold pressure. Clamp higher. No, not there, here. When it was over, the monitor leveled out to a steady rhythm. The SEAL's breathing eased. He was alive. Barely. Mara leaned back, blood smeared across her gloves, and finally exhaled. The young medic next to her blinked, still shaken. "Ma'am," he whispered. "How did you know to do that?" She stripped off her gloves, tossed them into the bin, and walked toward the wash station. "You learn a few things," she murmured, "if you stay alive long enough." Outside, word spread fast. Soldiers whispered the story across the base. "The nurse in Tent 3? The SEAL called her Valkyrie." "You mean like the myth?" "No, like the operative. I've heard that name before. Classified level. Black Ops." By nightfall, every soldier on the base had a theory. Some said she used to be in special forces. Others claimed she'd been court-martialed. One rumor insisted she'd saved an entire team single-handedly before disappearing into thin air. No one knew for sure, but everyone started watching her differently. Later that night, Harris found her outside the tent, sitting alone by the supply crates, staring at the horizon. The desert wind howled, carrying sand that glittered in the moonlight. "You going to tell me who you really are?" he asked. Mara didn't turn. "I'm a medic, sir. I keep people alive. Don't insult my intelligence." He folded his arms. "That man in there called you Valkyrie. That's not a nickname you pick up in nursing school." She gave a faint smile. "Maybe not," Harris sighed. "Look, I don't care about your past. But if you're hiding something that puts my men at risk..." She stood, suddenly close enough that he could see the faint burn scar on her collarbone, the kind only combat leaves. "I'm not the danger here," she said quietly. "The danger's out there, and he," she nodded toward the tent, "brought it with him." The commander frowned. "What do you mean?" But she didn't answer. She just walked back into the tent, her figure silhouetted against the harsh light. Inside, the SEAL stirred again, half-conscious, his voice cracked but urgent. "They'll come for me," he rasped. "They'll come tonight." Mara's eyes hardened. "Then we'll be ready." That night, as the desert wind howled through the base, every soldier slept with a rifle beside them, and one quiet nurse prepared for something none of them could see coming. Because somewhere out there, someone knew Valkyrie was alive again. The desert wind never stopped that night. It whispered through the base like a warning, thin, cold, and relentless. Inside the med tent, the wounded SEAL slept beneath layers of gauze and shadow. His breathing was shallow, but steady now. Mara sat at his bedside, silent, watching the flicker of the heart monitor. The others had left hours ago. She stayed, as she always did. Her hands were still, but her eyes weren't. They were far away, lost in memories she had buried under rankless uniforms and sterile rooms. 3 years earlier, the mountains were burning. Smoke curled through the night as black helicopters roared low over the ridges of Courage Valley, the place no maps named. Inside one of those helicopters, Lieutenant Mara Keene checked her kit one last time. Tourniquets, morphine, field sutures, all in place. Her teammates sat around her, faces painted black, rifles across their knees. They were a ghost unit, Task Force Fema 9, an extraction and rescue team that didn't exist on paper. "Command says 12 hostages, heavy resistance," said Sergeant Weller, the team lead. "Get in, get out." "Valkyrie, you're our angel," she smirked faintly. "I'm no angel, Sarge. Just good at keeping devils alive." The chopper banked hard, then the world exploded. RPG fire lit up the sky. Shrapnel tore through the fuselage. Screams filled the headset. When she came to, the helicopter was down, half buried in dust and flame. Half her team was dead. The rest were scattered, pinned down by enemy fire. Mara dragged Weller out first, bullets kicking up dirt around her. She pressed a bandage to his neck wound, used her own body as cover, and radioed for support. Task Force V9 requesting immediate evac. Static. Then nothing. No air support, no backup. No command. Just her, 4 wounded men, and a valley full of hostiles closing in. For 2 days, she kept them alive. She used smoke from burning brush to mask their heat signatures. She scavenged water from canteens taken off enemy scouts. She moved at night, carrying Weller, all 180 pounds of him, over rocky terrain while blood dripped down her arms. By the 3rd night, when she reached the evac point, only 2 men were still breathing. She refused to leave the others. When the helicopter pilot shouted that the area was hot and they had to go, she snapped back, not until every one of them is accounted for. She went back into the valley alone. The rescue footage, later recovered from a drone camera, showed a single figure moving through smoke and tracer fire, dragging bodies, patching wounds, firing back with precision when needed. By dawn, all 6 of her teammates were on board. Her call sign spread like wildfire among the Special Operations community. Valkyrie, the angel who carried soldiers out of hell. But she refused medals. Refused promotion. When command tried to commend her, she signed the discharge papers herself. Why? Weller had asked her before she left. Because I don't want to be a symbol, she said. I just want to forget. And she did. For 3 quiet years, buried behind the sterile white walls of a field hospital, wearing a nameless tag. Until tonight. Back in the present, Mara looked at the SEAL's sleeping form. His hand twitched as if reaching for something unseen. He was there that night. She remembered his voice, the one that yelled through gunfire. We're not leaving her behind. Now he was here, broken again. She stood slowly, pulling the silver chain from around her neck. The tag glimmered faintly. Blank, but carved inside with 3 letters only she knew. V9. Outside, boots pounded against gravel. A radio crackled. The perimeter guards were calling something in. Movement in the hills. Multiple signatures. She slipped the tag back under her collar, her eyes cold, steady once more. Looks like the past found us, she whispered. The first explosion hit just before dawn. A blast wave ripped through the base, shattering windows and slamming soldiers awake. Alarms screamed, dust filled the air, and the ground trembled beneath their boots. Inside the med tent, Mara was already moving before the second explosion came. Get the wounded under the tables, she shouted. Secure the morphine cases and seal the IV lines. No hesitation, no fear. Her tone cut through the panic like a knife. The young medic from the night before looked at her in disbelief. Ma'am, what's happening? She didn't answer right away. She stepped outside, scanning the horizon. Smoke and fire lit up the eastern perimeter. Mortar rounds, precise and close. Too close for chance. They're coming for him, she muttered. Minutes later, the base commander burst into the tent, half-dressed, radio in hand. Keen, what the hell is going on out there? Mortar teams on the ridgeline, she said, checking the SEAL's vitals. They know where we are. They're using infrared. How do you know that? She met his eyes. Calm. Cold. Because that's how I would do it. For a moment, Harris had no words. Then he barked orders into his radio. All units, perimeter defense. Lock down the medical wing! But even as he spoke, the third barrage hit. Shrapnel tore through the tent's canvas. Equipment toppled. A soldier screamed as a metal fragment slashed his arm. Get him here, Mara called, already clearing space on a cot. I need saline, sutures, and pressure dressings now. The medics obeyed instinctively. She was the calm in the chaos. Another explosion rocked the ground. The lights flickered. Somewhere outside, gunfire erupted. Contact! North wall! The attack had begun. She turned to the wounded SEAL. His eyes were half open, his breathing labored. He tried to speak. They found me. I know, she said softly, tightening his bandage. But they won't take you. Not again. Then she did something no one expected. She opened the supply locker and pulled out a small black case, one that had sat untouched for years. She pressed her thumb to a hidden latch. It clicked open. Inside lay a sidearm, polished, custom grip, serial number filed off. The other medic stared. "Where did you—" She chambered around with practiced ease. "Old habit." Then she looked at Harris. "If you want to keep this base standing, I need 2 squads, thermal gear, and a clear line of fire on that ridgeline." He blinked. "You're not cleared for combat. Neither were the last 6 people who died on that hill," she said sharply. "Your choice, Colonel." He hesitated, just long enough to see the way she stood, the way she scanned the horizon like someone who'd led men through fire before. Finally, he nodded. "You've got your squads." Minutes later, under a crimson dawn, she led the team through the shattered gates. The air was thick with smoke and sand. Gunfire echoed from the ridge above. "Stay low," she ordered. "They've got range, but they're blind to the left canyon." "How do you know that?" A corporal asked. She didn't look back. "Because I designed that ambush pattern." The soldiers exchanged glances, realization dawning. This wasn't just a nurse. This was someone who had been the storm once before. They crept through the ravine, gunfire lighting up the rocks around them. Mara moved like she'd never stopped. Smooth, efficient, unstoppable. When they reached the ridge, she gave the signal. The squad opened fire, tearing through the enemy line with precision. Moments later, silence fell, broken only by the crackle of burning brush. The corporal lowered his rifle, panting. "Who are you?" Mara reloaded calmly. "The reason you're still breathing." Back at the base, the sun rose over smoldering sand. The attack had failed. The wounded SEAL lived, and the soldiers who fought beside her that morning would never again call her just a nurse, because they'd seen what Valkyrie really meant. By the time the smoke cleared, the desert was silent again. The kind of silence that only follows chaos. The base was half in ruins. The med tent was a mess of torn canvas, burned sandbags, and scattered supplies, but every wounded man was alive, because of her. Colonel Harris walked through the wreckage like a man in shock. He had seen nurses patch up soldiers. He had seen medics drag the dying off battlefields. But he had never seen a woman pick up a rifle, lead 2 squads into enemy fire, and come back without losing a single man. When he found her, she was sitting beside the SEAL's cot, wiping the soot from her hands. Her uniform was blood-stained, her hair streaked with dust, but her posture, calm, focused, hadn't changed. "You disobeyed orders," Harris said quietly. She didn't look up. "I followed better ones." He almost smiled. "Yours?" "His?" She nodded toward the SEAL, still unconscious. "He gave me my first mission years ago." Before Harris could ask more, the tent flap rustled. A medic burst in, eyes wide. "Sir, he's awake." All conversation stopped. The SEAL's eyes fluttered open, pale blue, sharp even through the haze of painkillers. He looked around the room, confused at first, then focused on Mara. A weak smile crossed his lips. "Didn't think I'd see you again," he rasped. She exhaled, relief softening her expression for the first time. "You almost didn't." The colonel stepped forward. "Son, do you know who this woman is?" "Because she's just saved half my base, and I'm beginning to wonder what kind of nurse carries a sidearm with a silencer." The SEAL chuckled, a low, broken sound. "Nurse?" He turned to Harris. "Sir, that's not a nurse. That's Valkyrie." The room froze. The word hung heavy in the air. One of the medics frowned. "Valkyrie? As in, the Valkyrie?" The SEAL nodded. "You've heard the stories. The ghost from Operation Black Halo. The one who walked into an ambush, took out an entire insurgent command, and vanished before dawn." Harris blinked. "That was classified." "The whole op was sealed." "Yeah," the SEAL said softly, "because she was supposed to be dead." Mara's eyes lowered. She didn't deny it. "I didn't want this life anymore," she said quietly. "After Black Halo, I lost too many good men. So I left. No medals, no headlines. Just silence. The medical corps was supposed to be a second chance. Harris stared at her. You could have been sitting behind a desk at headquarters. She shook her head. And watched soldiers bleed while I did nothing. No, this... She gestured around the tent. This is where I can still make a difference. Even if no one remembers my name. The SEAL smiled faintly. Too late for that. Word spread faster than fire. By sundown, every soldier on base knew the truth. The quiet nurse with the steady hands was the same woman whose file was stamped top secret, do not release. The one who'd once commanded an elite recon unit and disappeared after saving an entire battalion. That night, no one slept. They gathered outside the med tent, waiting. When she finally stepped out, the crowd fell silent. Harris stood at the front, arms folded. You said you didn't want anyone to remember your name, he said. But I think you've earned it back. And then, to her shock, he saluted. One by one, every soldier followed. Rows of uniforms, lit by the glow of burning floodlights, saluting a woman they'd once ignored. For the first time in years, Mara, Valkyrie, didn't hide from who she was. She stood tall, returning the salute, eyes shining faintly in the firelight. That night, the SEAL wrote in his field journal, "She came here to heal, not to fight. But when hell came for us, she didn't run. She rose. Valkyrie isn't a myth. She's flesh, blood, and fire, and now we all know why even death fears her name."